And while some of the sectors and companies, for them, work from home was really a set part of work ethics.
One
Many
second,
employers,
Suchetna,
yeah,
I'm just muting everybody and then you can unmute yourself. There's
sure.
background noise.
There's a, yeah, yes, this is better. And all of us can hear me, right? You can do this. Great. Okay. So as I was saying that, while some sectors and companies, they've always had work from home as a part of their encoded work ethic, many employers have had to make this shift very abruptly, making cybersecurity an important part of this discussion, which is, of course, the topic at hand today. And amid this crisis, we have to remember that there are businesses which are still coping to keep companies secure as they go online and as they go virtual. We were just having this discussion about how safe Zoom is. These are conversations which are important and which are becoming the most relevant conversations, cybersecurity. And as emerging deep tech such as AI, machine learning, blockchain evolves, investment in cybersecurity will be a key differentiator for companies post COVID-19, which in turn will increase the demand for greater cybersecurity and privacy. One of the core principles in cybersecurity these days is the zero trust principle. For example, when we talk about cloud computing, we are actually trusting a vendor with the security of our corporate data. That's usually the understanding. But the zero trust principle really says that you trust nobody, especially when it comes to working remotely or from cloud. Securing the perimeter is simply not enough today. So secure your resources, not just your network segments. That's the mantra. Also in India, we have to remember that there's a lack of dedicated data protection or cybersecurity law, and this complicates the matter for actually businesses. Experts say that the risk liability in case of a breach of client data is actually squarely on the employer, even if the breach has happened from the employee's end because the employee was working from home.
Yeah, and India is the leader for maximum data usage enabled by smartphone penetration and affordable internet connectivity. Of course, these days data prices have crashed like nobody's business, and we are paying next to nothing. It all, and because of this proliferation, it also makes India among the most cyber attack countries in the world. And the growth of cyber attacks in India is absolutely phenomenal, which is of course not a good thing. And plus the exponential growth in India's digital economy, which is part of the government's plans, for a quick transformation. Government also realizes that we need a secure computing environment, and you have to build, confidence in, digital, for example, digital banking transactions, right? But in terms of cybersecurity, India has been lagging behind other nations, and in fact, we had no cybersecurity policy before 2013. But now things are changing, and there are quite a few things that are being put on the fast track. National Cybersecurity Policy is in the works, which has a unified vision. Data Security Council of India is building infrastructure at its Noida campus, including for things like startup incubation, for forensics, for testing, security training, R&D.
But the issue of cybersecurity is really not unidimensional. A key question is whose duty is it to secure key infrastructure? Critical infrastructure, you have to remember, is largely owned and operated by the private sector. This is a question which most nations are grappling with. You have to remember GDPR for that also. When Europe was grappling with it, these were key questions there. The other aspect of cybersecurity is data privacy and security. And this is where the role of private companies become magnified. We have to remember, Alokesh was just talking about cyber attacks in India. Cyber crime, which is focused on attacking an individual's data, has seen exponential growth in India. The NCRB, or the National Crime Records Bureau, has captured cyber crime as the fastest growing among cognizable crimes in 2017. 2017 is really the last year for which data is available, and records show that cyber crime has doubled in India between 2016 and 2017. Of course, a low base has impacted that number there, but still, it's a big number. And government's answer to this has been the Personal Data Protection Bill. There's some data that we have. Pre-COVID, pre-lockdown studies show that cybersecurity market, understandably in India, would grow at a 15.3% CGR from 1.9 billion in 2019 to 3 billion in 2022. But remember, these are pre-COVID estimates. Of course, with this COVID-induced lockdown, these numbers will, especially the CAGR, will shoot up. and that's
Yeah,
expected.
it's going to shoot up dramatically, and it's almost on a daily basis that the threat perception is changing because the ground situation is changing very, very fast, and the entire world is locked down. We were discussing just offline a little while ago. Is unimaginable even a couple of months ago that the entire world would be locked down. Many businesses are seeing 100% of their workforce, working from home. All of us joining this discussion from home, and I think all of you who are joining as attendees have also, joined from home. So it's a, paradigm shift that is happening. So here I would like to, toss the ball to Amit Singh of Palo Alto. Amit, I would like you to, start things off with a short address, and you might welcome everybody and
Yeah,
just outline your perspective on the subject, about
sure.
managing cybersecurity during a pandemic.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, thank you, and hello for you to all of you. Good morning. It's good evening over here. We are just finished.
There's been an internet issue with Amit. Would Anil or Sean, would you like to take that question?
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
It's better now.
Yeah,
Yes, you're
sure.
frozen
Okay.
for a
Sorry.
few minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. I may switch off video if it ends up being unstable. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's almost 6 weeks here of lockdown. So this is the new normal, unfortunately. And, beyond the personal sort of challenges, I think we're seeing the entire community, society go through a fairly big shift to online learning, to online work, many cases online elections wherever possible, online government. And these are things that while were, I think further ahead, at least from a policy perspective in the US, they're still very, very challenging. We had, I'll give you a couple of examples. We had, MIT that always had done large scale online learning, but they send all their students home very early on. My kids go to Michigan, same thing. They moved all their courseware online and needed to secure everything that they do, right? To make sure that the students are safe when they learn online. School districts, K through 12, all have moved to online learning. We have defense systems. People like the VA that take care of veterans that are now taking appointments that they never did. Appointments were not allowed as much online. This is very much a physical walk-in clinic type of environment. My wife's a physician. There used to be all these laws against telemedicine. Now telemedicine is allowed all 50 states in the country. So within 2 weeks, within 3 weeks, we've seen more change in policy, ability to transact information, commercial differences than we have not seen in the last 10 years. Certain sectors that were just completely locked down have fundamentally transformed because in the end, necessity has created invention. And we've had to invent ways of staying connected like we are here, getting our work done, getting teaching done, continuing the important work of governments around the world. And it's hard. Everything about it is hard. But we're adjusting. We're a few weeks ahead of India. And let me maybe share with you, if possible, some of the lessons I've seen learned. I've been talking to folks like yourself over the last 2-3 a day, CIOs, CEOs of companies around the world for the last 6 weeks. So maybe I can share with you, kind of what they're saying, what they're thinking, and then that would hopefully lead into the discussion we're going to have. I think most companies have gone through multiple phases of change to get there. And, I'm not going to talk about government or education. I'm going to focus on companies, commercial entities. I've gone through phases. The first phase was just business continuity. How do I run a business? And what is the basic connectivity and security do I need to allow this to happen? And many of you have gone through that phase already. This is the phase of VPN that's always on, firewall infrastructure in your data center, CASB or other tools to make sure that people that are logging from work can connect and make sure your data is being protected, that you're putting into SaaS products or whatever. And for us, that phase is by and large complete. And the solutions that our clients used was, look, think about it. We never really built in networking capacity for everyone working from home. The companies that were best in class had about 30% capacity, whether it's VPN capacity, firewall capacity, whatever you want to call it. And they had to go from 30% to 100% overnight. Not so easy to do, right? And, actually, I have to say, now that this phase is coming to an end, from a product, policy, architecture perspective, we've seen productivity rise again. It fell for the first week, started to rise again. Our colleagues came online, started working. It's not easy. You'll see one of my kids walk in asking for some milk or something like that before dinner. And so that, we're all dealing with that. And frankly, that's given a very human face to this strategy and try to get us all connected in a different dimension, because it's not all about work. I think phase 2 is where we're heading to now. New budgets have come out. Obviously, as April rolled out, we're into Q2. People are starting to really see the impact of the crisis on budgets overall, their revenue profile, and what's coming for the next 9 to 12 months. And my friends, unfortunately, it's not pretty. It's not going to be pretty, at least in the United States. It's going to be quite bad. And you're seeing, we've already spent $4 trillion from the government, and I suspect we have to do at least two times that more, because every business is shut down. They have no cash flow. There's going to be the jobs report comes out shortly. There'll be 20 million unemployed going to 40. 40 million is about 25% of the working population of the United States, about 160 million people. That's as much as the Great Depression, okay? Slightly ahead of the Great Depression. And when the economy is 70% made up of consumer spending, and those people don't have money or don't have a desire to spend money, we're going to be in a difficult spot for a long period of time. And you can see this happening all over the place, whether it's supply chain, the price of oil is gone to negative, which is completely ridiculous. You can't give away oil anymore. So in these challenging times, I think CIOs, CISOs, all trying to figure out, what does this mean to me? What does it mean to look? And different industries are going to go through their own process. Unfortunately, challenging in retail, challenging in hospitality and travel, very difficult times ahead. The worst part is the uncertainty, because you really don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't have large scale testing, unfortunately, in the United States. We don't know when the peak is going to be. We don't know when people can come back to work. And so uncertainty creates lack of business confidence, which results in lack of investment. And that cycle just repeats itself. And so we have to get ready for something difficult. And this is where phase 2 comes in, for what a lot of my friends and colleagues in other companies are going through right now. One, look at all the investments we made and try to rationalize them. What makes sense to continue doing? What should we stop doing? What should we consolidate and put in one and shut down something else in our infrastructure, in our projects and programs, to match whatever the revenue base is that's coming in and the operating investment that your shareholders are looking for. Second phase, plan for business continuity at scale for a long period of time. This, as many of us were discussing, is something that could go on for a while. It may come back in different weather, and we might have to work from home for a long time. That is not how networks were designed. We were not designed for the level of resiliency that we're talking about, the level of security we're talking about. And I think the third phase is a redesign phase. So this is phase 2. And I think we're entering, we're just at the cusp of phase 3. In many of our discussions, I had a bunch of them this morning, is look, if this is the new architecture, meaning we're going to deliver many more remote services, we're going to be using cloud more, should we think of a re-architecture of our work, re-architecture of our network, try and create a different approach? Because a lot of people in the United States and elsewhere have the data center at its core, and everything sort of hangs off of that. And many clients here that I've talked to are saying, maybe we need to think about something a lot more permeable, flexible, a perimeter that expands, and I apply security and give access to wherever the user is in a manner that's zero trust and so on. And so those discussions have started, early days for that, really. And, just our own perspective just, is threat, and the third segment I wanted to give you a quick update on is threats are on the rise. So wherever there's vulnerability, unfortunately, the bad guys look for and attack that vulnerability. And so that also came in waves. The first wave was, pretty basic phishing, but a bit more at scale, trying to kind of take a workforce that's maybe has let its guard down, has less training or whatever. That's number one. Number two was focused primarily on botnets, bot attacks, large scale attacks against infrastructure, because now you have different convergence points of where your data is coming in. In the past, you used to have people behind your protection of your network, your physical location, but now actually it's quite different. And we saw that. And the third wave, we have about 5 clients going through that, is large scale ransomware. This one client in France got attacked because endpoints, in many cases, you've let people use whatever they can to connect to your network. And that's sometimes not even just employees, that could be suppliers, because they just have to get work done. And that is a vector that we've seen be negatively impacted. So ransomware on the rise, botnet attacks, phishing, of course. And, we'll see this sort of work from home be this weak link, unfortunately, especially for senior executives. And, something that we are advising people on the right approach to handle many of these things. For us, we've been, really been grateful to be part of many of your infrastructure and found a way to support it. Our supply chains are unimpacted. We don't manufacture anything in China. We make it in the United States and ship it globally. That was one part. Second part is, our remote access product, which is called Prisma Access. We had just moved to a public cloud network infrastructure from our own cloud just for the purpose of scaling it up globally. And just some of you know this, we moved to Google's backbone, private backbone, the private network that Google has, and their POPs, 120 POPs around the world, primarily because of low latency and fast access, so that we could really give any user, mobile or branch or home user, very quick onboarding, and then be able to use the product immediately, because we move away from the internet and back into Google's network backplane and can guarantee SLAs and so on. We've seen the usage of this product increase by 500% in 2 weeks. It's ridiculous. And, thankfully, we're grateful to Google for this. That's why your YouTube videos are so fast, even when you travel, by the way, we have not had a hiccup. We had this one client, large global consulting company that had about 30,000 users, mostly in the UK and US. They moved to 350,000 users in 1 week. Didn't have to do anything, auto-scaled everything, and really helped our clients out at a tough time when they needed to get everybody onboarded, low latency, high security, so you can get your work done. So we've been grateful to be in a position to help our clients. We'll see, what the future holds, but I suspect that many of us will be talking about the redesign phase as well. What is the right way to deliver security for you based on your industry, based on the architecture you've chosen. And I think there's opportunity actually of simplifying your approach, saving money along the way, but also being more secure. But anyway, I'll pause that and maybe turn it back over to you for other comments. Suchatna.
Thank you,
Alok.
Amit.
Thanks.
And, quite a scary picture. But, one quick question to you before I go to the other panelists is, in this kind of situation where you're actually seeing, the kind of job loss that you're talking about, it's quite scary. And the impact on the economy is absolutely, very, very hard. Do you see companies putting cybersecurity on the back burner, on the side burner, as in they're not taking it that seriously because they're more, they're busier making sure that the business runs?
Yeah.
What kind of sense do you get from your clients?
Yeah, we've actually seen an uptick the other way.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's pretty global. I don't think that's a US phenomena. We've seen a general uptick because people intuitively know my employees are not inside my network or inside my physical location. They're elsewhere. And by the way, we're not the only ones. You can see cybersecurity across the board, including our competitors who are doing a good job. We've seen an uptick in investment to protect the data. Because the worst thing you can have alongside COVID is a cyber attack.
Yeah, that's good to hear. In fact, we'll move to the panelists now. In fact, first I'd like to go to the companies that directly handle consumer data, like banks and financial institutions. So my question here is to Sankarshan Banerjee, Asim Rastogi of Razorpay, and Durga Prasad of Cholamandalam. Basically, you had a cybersecurity policy before COVID struck. And did that cybersecurity policy include remote working? What were the tenets of that policy? And do you find the policy that you had before, was it up to the mark in handling a business continuity situation that you're seeing today? So we'll start with Mr. Banerjee.
You're on mute, Mr. Banerjee.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yes, we had some work from home cybersecurity policy, but the thinking was totally different. The thinking was that for the people who are traveling, for the people who are temporarily sick, there was a work from home. So we had quite a few people configured, but not more than 50 or 60 people used to log in every day because those were the only people who were not there. Banks in particular have been very office centric. And office centric using end user equipment that is supplied by the bank. Banks, at least in India, nobody has any significant BYOD policy had. Of course, there is a lot of concern about the privacy of the data because the banks handle sensitive data. There is customer confidential data that can potentially be used for fairly large financial scams. So, of course, all that changed. We went from about 50 connections a day to about 2,000 connections a day. Part of it was the challenge of course, providing the infrastructure, scaling it up, this, that, all of which we solved in a bit. But then we started hitting the limits of our current policy quite quickly. We just didn't have enough laptops distributed. So we had to start getting laptops from outside. Then we realized getting laptops, loading them with the full security profile of RBL Bank was just too time consuming. The normal cycle for that is actually 3 days per laptop. Now we put 5 people in a room and started loading it in a few hours time. But then we soon realized even the 5 people in a room are not coming because they've been either their families have told them not to travel or they're physically unable to travel because there was no public transport, this, that. So then we moved to virtual desktops using BYOD devices. There we, of course, we had to convince the CISO, we had to take some exceptions, we had to do some risk highlighting. We were unable to shift policy in this time. So we basically just took some exceptions. But again, all this thinking was that 15th March it would start, maybe 2nd, 3rd, 4th April it would end. Now we're realizing we are in for 6 months. Policy exceptions for that long is not a good idea. So now we started doing very different things. One is, we realized that this on-premise infrastructure is not very suitable for this kind of sudden change in especially where public access is concerned. See, BYOD is effectively public access. We don't know whether the
Right.
employee is logging in or his sister is logging in from New Jersey.
True.
And I've worked with Amit before in an NBFC where we decided to go Google. And this was one of the things that we had even then, India Infoline went for Google in a very large scale. In 10 years ago, about 20,000 people went for Google. And the original thinking was, yeah, Google is fine, but let's restrict that Google part to Office. Let's not give them email from home. And it took a lot of convincing and a lot of checks and balances to get it done working correctly, even without Office connected. Now, suddenly that same thing that a bank has is we are trying to shift. So we did a few things. One is we said we will do zero trust. We cannot trust the end user device. We cannot put in the controls required to the end user device. We had to we had to experiment quite rapidly with a few different kinds of zero trust models, some of which work better than others. Then our proxy was on premise. So we said we have to move our proxy to the cloud because otherwise everybody has to first do a VPN into our premise and then go outside, which is both a bandwidth problem and giving VPN to the public is a problem. Then we don't know which hacker gets access to the VPN profile. Then we said the next thing is that we must discourage people from doing high traffic, high volume activities like video calling or even Outlook, the desktop client, on VPN, because we'll soon 3,000 people will choke bandwidth quite quickly if they all start doing the same video call. So we'll therefore have to do that as direct from the person's broadband, which means change the proxy rules, set them up, first move to cloud proxy, then change the proxy rules to allow all this. So these shifts happened all in 10-12 day period. We also said that our workspaces, virtual VDI workspaces, our original thinking was we'll give on-premise VDI. And we started giving in a fairly large scale. Then we quickly realized that in theory, our on-premise VDI is secure. In practice, we've never had that kind of high VPT testing that is required to give it to BYOD devices. We've always assumed that the device would be our own device.
Right.
And am I confident that given that our full security staff is not even on-premise and that they don't have experience doing large-scale public access, am I confident that our systems are hard enough? Probably not. So we started then therefore using Amazon workspaces. Hopefully Amazon has not hopefully, Amazon surely has the practice of giving large-scale public access. So if you have Amazon as your primary front end and that gets compromised, then it's their problem. As long as your link is a private secure link and we can just cut the link and temporarily we'll have outage but no compromise. So those are the steps we started doing. The biggest caveat was that CISOs in normal times have a certain level of expertise. They tend to not realize that that cannot easily be expanded 1,000 times with the same thing. You can't just multiply what you knew about an on-premise security by 1,000 and expect it to be just as secure.
Right.
And that's a debate we've had, and therefore we've had to work with different models, preferably by transferring responsibility to other people.
Right.
Security spending has indeed gone up in the short term, but I suspect it's going to go down in the long term. Our revenues are going to take a big nosedive, and therefore, along with every other spend, security spend will suffer. We will also ask our partners to start taking some of the pain on our behalf, because sometimes we would rather have the security, but we have no ability to, in the short term, invest in it. So those things will happen.
Thanks. And Mr. Banerjee, especially thanks for giving us such a detailed breakdown, of what all you did. It's really very, very enlightening to hear, and of course, scaling it up, especially when you're handling money of other people.
Yes.
Which is what banks do. It's really very, very, tricky. So well done, and keep up the good work. And we'll come back to you in a bit. And I would like to throw the same question now to Aseem Rastogi of Razorpay. Aseem, what's your view? And what kind of policy did you have pre-COVID in terms of cybersecurity, and is it working? And have you done similar things to what RBL Bank has done? What Mr. Banerjee outlined just now?
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Mr. Banerjee, for a detailed account. That was really insightful. So yeah, being a startup, we had few things going for us, which is we were cloud-based, so we didn't have the data center model at all. we were completely on cloud. So that way we did not have to kind of scale up on the infrastructure side or bandwidth and so on. Even our internal applications are also hosted on AWS. So that way we got something going, but what we were not ready for was the like 100% workforce going online and remotely. And of course, the human side of those challenges, being a young workforce at our company, a lot of human side challenges which we have to deal with. For example, I mean, these folks do not have their houses, they're living in shared accommodations, and internet quality is poor. And some of them travel to their native places where even power is a problem. So those kind of challenges, and then how to keep them motivated and engaged was our bigger challenge as such, which we are still grappling with and kind of coming up with answers. Now, coming from a cybersecurity point of view, we have definitely seen an uptick on phishing. So we have to do a lot of trainings, refreshers, so that people recognize what the phishing attack looks like and those kind of aspects. So people are more educated and what and again. I mean, this things kind of education campaign is kind of going on to educate our workforce and make keeping the environment secure.
So do you get the feeling you must be having a lot of young people in your workforce, right?
Yeah, very young. I mean, we have
the millennials and all that.
Yeah, I mean, average age is about 27 years. So
yeah, and you know, typically the millennials are known to be a lot of have a different mindset, and they're flexible, and they say, oh, I don't want to be tied down to office and all that. But in this kind of situation, do you see the millennials also wanting to come back to office rather than work from home?
Absolutely. and biggest draw is food, actually, because now they have to cook their own food, arrange for the groceries. So yeah, I mean, that's
one of the commonest questions we get on our intranet, our internal chat. Will they provide food when I come to work?
It happened in our office also, but thankfully it was resolved. So I'll move to Durga Prasad Swaminathan of Cholamandalam. Thank you so very much, Mr. Swaminathan, for joining us. Yeah. Your view on this, what was your pre-COVID kind of
sure, yeah.
Policy, and did you find it,
Yeah, sure. I'll share quick background. As Chola, we have more than 1,000 branches across the country, and we have over 15,000 feet on street. So these are the folks who carry the tablet devices as part of our sales and collections organization. So since they were already, pretty much remote working either at a dealer counter and so on, for them, the impact to continue to work remotely was minimal. Of course, the dealerships are all shut down, so maybe they are now pretty much at home or maybe contacting the customers over phone. But for them, I think the impact has been minimal. Even though as a business, there has been a huge, like others shared as well, there has been a huge impact due to the whole shutdown and impact on the financial services. But for the feet on street, I would say they still continue, their way of working hasn't changed except for the lockdown impact. Now, if you take the non-feet on street, these are the people who were, more office bound. We had, progressively, we started moving away from desktops to laptops more as a BCP initiative, because if a couple of years ago, there were, a cyclone, Varda cyclone in Chennai, and we also had a huge flood situation. So at that time, the organization had moved progressively to say, let's move away from desktops to laptops. But we had not completed the exercise. So there were a lot of back office people who were still using desktops. And in the last couple of days, we had to actually scramble to get, ship those desktops to the individual user homes, and also make sure we gave them a UPS. So that, given, like others mentioned, the, power situation, if there's any trip or so on, you will end up with an unusable machine at the end of the exercise. So that became, a huge aspect of what we do. So while we had a very minimal remote working, so to speak, a BCP was more of, somebody from branch A being able to work from branch B, but totally, disconnected, working from home was not there at all. So that's something now, while we had the VPN capability, now we are making sure we have the capacity to handle that. So that's one big part of what this change is coming through. And purely from a cybersecurity perspective, I would like to share two things. One was, in the past week, one of our technology partner got impacted by the Maze ransomware. So very quickly, we had a site-to-site tunnel as well as VPN connectivity provided to them. So very quickly, we had to go back and disable them and make sure, there is no adverse impact to us. So that was something we need to make sure that these are things which are going to only increase as people start working more remotely. Educating them on what is the right way to work and not fall into any of these potential issues is going to be critical. And what we realize is not just our employees, it's also the partners we work with, where the footprint for somebody to attack and get into our network becomes much more wider.
So how
the second is sorry, go ahead.
I mean, how are you doing this awareness drive? Is it like you're...
So what we have done is the second part where, fortunately last year we moved to an, new email and collaboration platform. So that has given us an option to reach out to everyone without, them being, back on our network or back on our internet portal. So that has given we use a SaaS HRMS software. So where we have ability to do broadcast messages, be able to have regional chats and so on. So that has been a big way for us to drive awareness of, what is the best practice to do that. One other challenge which we face as we transition during, the switch between in a week or so, was earlier we used to do, give our users with laptops an APN data card so that while they are away from the corporate network, they can still come back and work as if they are virtually in the extended part of the network. And during the last couple of days, we actually struggled to get those additional APN data cards. So we had to end up giving open data cards to our employees. So to mitigate the risk there, what we have done is we have actually tied up with a cybersecurity startup, and we have pushed agent software on these open data card users, so that what I can see as a dashboard today is, how many of them are having their OSs up to date? How many of them are having the firewall active, AV active? Does anybody of them have access to specific ports that are open? And so on, so that we have a better visibility that if there is going to be an increased risk because of the remote working, at least we know where to go after and address. So those are, I would say, more post-COVID reaction, but what we are going to do is trying to bridge the gap between where we were earlier and where we stand now.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Swaminathan. I have a question, a quick question for Anil. As you have a wide range of customers and companies that you work with Palo Alto works with. So what would you say are unique to industries such as manufacturing, IT, ITES, and BFSI in India?
Yeah, so, Suchetna, of course, we've been on this journey with many of these verticals, looking at three things. One is obviously their own environment. The second is industry best practices that their peers have adopted. And third is in terms of making sure that there are regulatory compliances specifically related to BFSI. So I'll answer in two parts. First, in the current COVID situation, I can probably give a couple of examples which will help in terms of what we've done for our customers related to these industries. So, DOT came out with guidelines, DOT came out with certain guidelines, especially on the IT, ITS segment. And we had a customer who came to us and said, we want these guidelines to get implemented. At the same time, we want to go to work from home very quickly. And this is a customer, I named the customer, it's EXL, 40,000 users spread globally, right? And we kind of managed to make sure that we are complying with the DOT guidelines, which was to make sure that they have static IP for every user. But what was unique to us was it really didn't depend on any device. So for us, we were tying the policy, security policy to the user, regardless of what devices they were using, right? So that secure work from home was very unique. They really, in fact, today they are a very happy customer of ours, because now they don't have to worry about which user is using what device. We know the user, we can identify. That was one thing, and now we are obviously replicating that to a couple of other customers. The second is, in a span of about 4 hours for one of the consulting firms, we kind of spun up for 15,000 of their users, we spun up the work from home infrastructure. This is what Amit was talking about, using our Prisma Access, right? So just think of this. We had a conversation. The customer liked the whole concept of work from home, no investments in terms of their physical infrastructure. So in about 4 hours time, we're getting access or giving access to 15,000 of their users working from home, right? So that is in the short term. Longer term, what we've done, Suchetna, is we've kind of moved our customers thinking product to platforms, right? Because platforms are more extensible. They've been thinking about moving to an architecture, and everybody talks about zero trust. But let me share, the guy who created zero trust architecture is with Palo Alto Networks. His name is John Kinderberg. So we have a couple of our leading banks, definitely the leading private sector bank, who's on this transformation journey where they're saying, let's implement zero trust. Let's get into macro segmentation, micro segmentation discussions. Let's look at traffic, securing traffic, whether it's north, south, east, west, across all, whether it's data center, perimeter, edge. So it's a journey, right? So we are helping our customers transform their thinking on security to be more preventive, have visibility as de facto, so the visibility of threats, and then make sure that they have an automated response in terms of, when threats occur, what is it that they can do? Prevent everything we can, but whatever we can't, then we have to automatically get into creating a playbook where we can, respond as early as possible. So this is what we're doing. Now, in terms of regulatory compliance, we have products across the board where we have helped our customers look at regulatory compliances. In fact, we have playbooks where we can provide these compliance reports out of the box, especially on cloud and cloud security. So we provided this. So in a nutshell, what we are doing is, again, looking at the security as a business enabler, not as a cost center, thinking of security as a preventive capability, not as a reactive capability, moving customers out from products, right, to a more platform approach. And like I said, it also involves a lot of education around processes and people to make sure that everybody becomes cyber aware, right? So those are some of the initiatives that we are driving. And on one last point, we work with the government very closely, right, where we are also creating awareness in schools as well as in colleges. So in south of India, there are 26 universities where we provided our curriculum just to make sure that we are creating the skill sets within India so that we can address, what we believe will be a huge opportunity going forward in the area of cybersecurity.
So, Anil, as you mentioned, it's a journey, but we have to remember that in this journey, there are several challenges which have been thrown up by COVID-19. And I'm speaking about securing data. And when I speak about that, I want to know how you're securing data without compromising on productivity. This is a question I have for Parvez, for Raj, and for KN Bhatt. So whoever wants to go first. My question is that the challenges that COVID-19 specifically has thrown up to issues of securing data, how are you coping with those challenges, keeping productivity on your mind?
So this is KN Bhatt here. If we look at securing data, organizations globally never thought of information and data to be the asset to protect. Most of our security architectures, designs always focused on perimeters. And the challenge which anyway came as a realization was when GDPR came into effect, where organizations realized that security by design or privacy by design is a concept that they need to imbibe and build structures around that. It is still an ongoing journey for a lot of organizations, including Nextime. So some of the key steps that are very important in this area, and one of the most cost-effective step or recommendation, which all my industry colleagues will also agree upon, is user awareness. So an aware user is a secure asset for you, because at the end of the day, people are the ones who are using your infrastructure. In spite of having the best controls, best perimeter defenses, you can monitor, at the most you can detect. But user action is something where you need to make him aware. And that is an area where people need to also invest and focus upon. During COVID-19, over communication is the key, for all CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, compliance experts, it is better to over communicate. It is better to make your people aware of the do's and don'ts, because most of us who are technically inclined assume that people will take these steps and precautions, but that is not the case. In fact, even qualified technical people sometimes get exposed to blind spots. So user awareness is one key factor that needs to be taken care. Second, there's always a misnomer that if I'm using cloud, I'm protected. People don't realize that cloud is just a shift of environment. It moved out from your house and you've kept your jewelry in your neighbor's house. If the neighbor's house is stolen, you are equally exposed. So people need to realize that cloud on its own will not protect you. You need to start establishing controls on the cloud. You need to be aware of standards for securing the cloud. Third is VPN. Again, this is being used commonly. VPN, the primary purpose was to offer connectivity, end-to-end connectivity. The concept says it offers encryption end-to-end. But if not configured correctly, it's a conduit for mollified and unwanted perpetrators to get a red carpet into your house. So some steps, and in fact, most of the VPN service providers or firewall service providers offer this, is pre-logon VPNs. That means every time a user wants to use the internet, he needs to first switch on the Office VPN by default. Otherwise, internet is not accessible to him. So that creates a layer of security, and for the risk management team and the technical infrastructure team, a user walking into unknown is prevented in the first step. And I think prevention and preemption are two of the key factors of protection in this environment, where convergence and distributed endpoints are becoming a challenge to handle. Another big revelation that came out was that the so-called broadband service providers who provide residential connections usually don't tell the correct story. So 100 Mbps is only on paper. What I realized is that it's being shared with 1,000 people around me, and all of them are untrusted and unprotected. So this VPN configured correctly is a good security feature. It doesn't come at a very heavy price. So the investment is not big. And a lot of service providers, including Palo Alto, have gone out of their way to enable this and help organizations handle the increased latency load, because maybe we had 500 VPN users, suddenly have 3 lakh VPN users. So they were able to scale their solution to handle this load effectively. Dual factor authentication in a VPN is another good factor, at least for the financial industry. For at least you will be doubly sure that he is the person who's actually accessing and using the VPN who was intended to use it. Lastly, as I said, communication is the key. Awareness is the one which will help us win this battle. End of the day, it's your people who are using your infrastructure. And one big question that as a solution we are working at in SKP is cyber security defenses and ethics. The challenge that we usually face as an organization, and all business leaders will agree with this, is the dilemma of insider threats. I protect my external perimeters. I am protecting the routes of access to my organization through infrastructure. I am monitoring it regularly. But what happens to situations that people are exposed to where they need to make a choice? And insider threats are real, and they are one of the major causes of most of the data breaches worldwide, most of the successful cyber attacks worldwide. Big organizations or small organizations, this is one threat which those ignored, and they need to invest in it. Third-party service providers also are another area where they need to risk manage.
Right. Very important points thrown in by Mr. Bhatt. Mr. Joshi, would you like to take a stab at that? He's talking about internal threat. He's talking about threat security challenges that vendors throw up, security challenges which are external. And all of this will have to be handled by an organization keeping productivity in mind. So what are your thoughts on it, Mr. Joshi?
Yes, I think you hit the nail when you said the classic dilemma in security has always been productivity and security balance, which is there. So when we as Aditya Birla Group, we look at it, considering our landscape, which is globally spread in 15 businesses and multiple sectors and different levels of sophistication. We also had this challenge because Aditya Birla brand is used by all the companies. So the corporate center always has a sense of custodianship, of what's happening
The
everywhere.
bot is very faint.
Hello?
It's Mr. Joshi who's speaking. You, could you be a little louder, Mr. Joshi, is what Mr. Banerjee is saying.
Okay, sure. So when we, first is when we look in Aditya Birla Group's context, we are a very globally spread organization, 15 businesses, and more than 100,000 people, and diversity of businesses and their sophistication, because we have businesses like services, financial services, and retail and telecom, and we also have manufacturing businesses like textiles and pulp and fiber, and spread in, not just India, around the world. So the level of the calibration of how to handle where is extremely important. So when we luckily, of course, we had some sort of work from home policy, which is there, like most organizations had, but it was certainly not geared up to the level which we have. And but we had the basic infrastructure in place, and luckily we had a window also. See, the whole thing did not come suddenly on the 24th. The signals already there for almost 2 3 weeks. That's what's going to come. And so we prepared ourselves. For us, it was taking 25, 30,000 managerial staff to work from home in a matter of, as we say, week, 2 weeks, which was there, and then thousands of VPN and so on and so forth. So of course, the first priority was to take people, to make people do work through regular connections, and also people who would have to work through VPNs and so on and so forth. So that was the first priority. And and the kind of challenges that we are looking at and what we addressed was, one is, of course, we see that our VPNs were not really, because it was not for this kind of situation which we are looking today. And so we are looking at how we were not even using its capabilities. So one is, of course, leveraging what your VPN can do. And and in these crisis situations, as they say, the first thing is the brilliant basics. Your basics have to work, in the sense that whether your machines are patched, whether the AV is updated or not, and so on and so forth. So of course, ensuring that your VPN is able to do these things is a very important part. And at the same time, we have been looking now at, alternate, because for every solution we have almost alternate technologies in the group. So what can we do so that more robust VPN structure? That is one. Second is, our securities operations center has played a very, very important role into that, because we earlier, we have also brought rules on how the user behavior analytics is there. For example, if you are logging in from Delhi today, and suddenly we don't want to see, if you have a login from the same ID from Singapore or anywhere else, it's a threat. So this is like, almost, looking at the user behavior, looking at the traffic which is coming up. So making our SOC more, intensely monitoring these things, making our, rules in the SOC far more robust, has been a big priority for us. So that, there are multiple levels of defenses. Even if we feel that the endpoint is not enough secure, or the user is not enough sophisticated, we are actually looking at the traffic very closely when it enters the network. So I think, it's some, um, a billion basics is very important for us.
Mhm.
And so looking at leveraging our VPN capability, and also looking at alternate technology, and strengthening our securities operations center to look at threat very close, to look at the traffic very closely, is something quite, something that's a focus area for us. And also, of
Great.
course, so now you also spoke of investments, actually. So what I feel is that, of course, there would be always a little bump up from investments, but at the same time, I think we are focusing on what's more important. Like the basics, as even before COVID, scenario came up, our
Mhm.
goal for FY21 was brilliant basics. We have invested reasonably enough. We will continue to invest what is required to be done. But I think the big focus we had planned this year was, anyway, that the basics of security has to be right. And I think if basics of security, in sense of, PCS, AV and patches, and proper connections, and and monitoring of user behavior, then I think most things are taken care of. Of course, you need sophisticated solutions also. So that's one part. Now coming to DLP, things like data loss prevention and information rights management, we have implemented in many ways across the group. But at the same time, this is something we want to look at very closely.
Okay, Parvez, various inputs coming in from the speakers who've taken this topic up. So awareness is one issue. You also have a large workforce where awareness was awareness the biggest challenge when it came to balancing securing your data and productivity.
Yes, yes. I'll just give a background of the scenario at our organization. We never had a home working or remote working policy within BCCL. And by the time we realized that, this could be a problem and we might have to, allow our employees to work from home. It was already, almost February. And we started working on this. And then we realized that most of the BCP plans that we made were planned for 30% or 40% of the employees to work from home. Here we were facing a scenario where we have to allow 100% of the employees to work from home. So everything was put in scratch. I believe most of the participants already spoke about VPN. So we implemented VPN module in the firewall, implemented VPN, implemented MFA. These things, with the help of our vendors, I mean, Palo Alto is one of them. With their support, went off very smoothly and we were able to transition. The challenge that we faced was, number one, BYOD, how to give immediately laptops and desktops to remote users, to home users, to all employees. Second challenge we faced was that every employee had an internet connectivity at home, but that was not enough. So that has to be revisited. Third challenge that we faced was that even though we were able to allow the employees to connect, many critical applications were not available for all employees, even on the network. How to make sure that the relevant employees get relevant privileges and access to those applications. So these challenges we are still facing. And coming back to user awareness now, IT companies have users who are aware of most of the basics of IT security, but in other organizations like ours, not 100% workforce is IT sensitive. So we have to give them complete communication packages, call them individually, call VPN users, tell them how to use MFA, how to use remote access, what should be the home working guidelines, how they can use their home workstation BYOD devices, whether they can go to internet, whether they allow their children to use the machines which they use for working in office, or remote connectivity. Can they do leisure activities on those workstations? How to check antivirus updates? All those things we have to, communicate to each and every employee. Now it's a process. I mean, we did multiple communications. Still, we realize that it is not enough. I mean, we are creating a CBT, which we'll publish on a cloud-based service for all employees to go through, and we monitor that, feedback from there. Other challenge that we realized was because we never had home working, our applications were never geared up for, data access in silos, application access in silos. So we'll have to re-engineer the entire operations and application setup to make them, comply with security requirements in home working. Apart from this, the most important challenge that we face is how to monitor the employees' activities. Right now, we get requests from management as to, the management is used to see the employees continuously face to face. Now the challenge is we allow them to work from home. How to make sure that they are working and how to assess their work. The tools requiring,
That is really difficult for me.
Yes.
How do you do that? You have spy cams all over.
Yes. So we actually told them that, this could be a area which could be good in companies where each and every interaction with IT system is considered as performance. But in most of the cases, these tools will only tell you how the employee has been interacting with the IT system. It may not give the assessment of the exact performance. So many related issues are coming up, and the topmost is, because home working was never a requirement, every user, manager, or senior management, whenever they face a problem, they come up with open this, open that. As a CISO, in this scenario, it is really very tough to push it back, saying that we cannot let our guard down just because homework is happening. Home working is happening. We cannot keep on opening everything, right? So reviewing each and every request from security perspective, vis-a-vis business requirement, and keeping in mind the traditional principles are upheld from security perspective, and then opening systems is a big challenge. And going forward, though we have reviewed each and every such request, we are sure that there will be certain requests which could lead to security issues. So we'll have to periodically review all the changes that we have done, all the ports and or services that we have opened, and close them back if not required.
Parvez, you just spoke about BYOD. In fact, a colleague a few days back, my colleague, she carried her desktop back from office.
Yeah. Desktop back?
So you spoke about BYOD, right? So, and you spoke... Yes, and you spoke about how laptops had to be made available to everybody because BCCL is not an organization which was used to work from home. So my colleague had to go to office and carry her desktop back.
Yes, there are such scenarios. Not only that, we have scenarios where application is not available at home. So we have given within VPN over MFA remote access to their desktops in office. Someone goes to office, switch on their desktop, connects remotely on the desktop, and then access application. Right. And that also poses a challenge that the data that we never wanted to be in BYOD devices in homes is now going there. Now, I mean, we'll have to invest or think on technologies which will allow us to work from home at the same time data does not, go from one environment to the other.
Right. In fact, Parvez, right in my own team, you have all three scenarios where people are using. One of my teammates has brought her desktop to office. Another is connecting through VPN to his office desktop, and the rest of us are using laptops. So you have it's a microcosm of what you're doing across the organization.
Yes.
So you can see, and you wanted to add something else.
Yeah, I was saying, even though
security policy.
Go ahead,
Mr. Banerjee.
Our security policies are running up against the limits of physical availability. There just aren't enough laptops available. There just aren't enough people available to support or configure these laptops.
Absolutely. That is why she had to, in fact, Nidhi, who is on this call, she had to bring her, desktop home from office because there was no laptop available to give her.
Yeah.
So thanks. That's a great, insight on balancing data, and obviously, cybersecurity policies and data policies are evolving as we go ahead because these are scenarios that we have not imagined before. Nobody could have imagined this kind of a BCP scenario. So things are evolving, things are changing. Meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll move to Sean. Sean, if you could tell us, give us a little background on, as companies strive to, adapt to this virtual environment and virtual work and remote and, work from home. So what can, a situation like this, a situation like a pandemic, what can it teach us and teach all the organizations here, about how we should leverage cloud connectivity and automation?
Yeah, it's a good question, and thank you. And thank you so far. I've written an amazing amount of notes down of, I guess, all of the learnings that many of you have actually shared so far as well. If I think about some of the things, the learnings of what a pandemic like this or a crisis in general can actually teach us, a lot of it really sort of stems from, I think, going through and doing a lot of the planning first up. I think many organizations, what I've found over the last 6 weeks, really probably haven't thought too much about what some of the key applications are, what's considered critical to their own organization. We have to quickly scale up, sort of working from home, having our entire workforce working from their own houses. And then I guess a lot of the challenges that many of you called out was simply, how do we provide remote access? I think what we've actually learned is it's not simply a case of providing remote access, because remote access is really around just the connectivity element. And many of you talked about the bandwidth challenges that are actually out there. It's more a case of how do we provide secure remote access? And what I mean by that is, think about the world that we've actually sort of gone through over the last number of years. We've started to progressively move out to cloud, leveraging public cloud, whether it be software as a service, even creating our own applications sitting in public cloud. So the world as we know it has actually changed, where not everything comes back into our corporate data centers. Our corporate data center, or the public cloud, is effectively an extension to our own corporate data centers. And this is where I think more of the intelligent decisions need to be made, where we say, well, if they're the critical applications that are actually sitting out in public cloud, the traffic necessarily doesn't need to route back into my corporate environment. And that's how I can start to manage and really alleviate a lot of the challenges around providing secure remote access. I'm trying to think of the conversation of one of the questions that sort of, or the points that was actually raised around from Mr. Banerjee. It was one of the first ones that actually came up, talking about how, some of the traffic needed to be routed the right way when it's starting to look at, things like Zoom. For me, I start to think about everything. Being a security practitioner, every single thing that we do needs to be secure. Irrespective of the application, we still need to apply some sort of security policy around all of that. So for me, it's not simply a case of just route traffic out and that's kind of all it is. We play traffic cop. It's more a case of actually enforce the policy. I want to ensure that the right people are using the right applications and adhering to a particular policy. So I think what this really has actually taught us is the fact that we should say, let's apply a security blanket across every single thing that we do, irrespective if we're in the corporate office, in the branch offices, or as we all are now, working from home. But do that in a secure way. Choose those applications that we say, for me, Zoom is one of those applications that we're all dependent on. We should still be scanning it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be scanned in my own corporate premises. I could effectively say, well, if it's Zoom, I could scan it out in the public cloud, because that is a cloud-based solution for that matter. So I think one of the big things for me it's taught is, better ways of doing things. And this is where I've seen a lot of organizations leveraging more of that secure remote access conversation, as opposed to just simply looking at it from connectivity. Talking to a lot of the analysts, they've seen that in their conversations, many people have also started to say that they need a short-term fix. But then I guess equally, they've seen probably about 60% of the people they've actually surveyed said they're actually looking at this for that long-term fix as well. Because as Amit said, this is now the new normal. Looking at that whole sort of design phase that he talked about in sort of that phase 3 was really around, how do we now start thinking about this is going to be what life may look like? Potentially there could be another wave of viruses that are actually out there. So for me, I see a lot of people leveraging cloud, looking to see how they can start to really radically and rapidly sort of roll out their digital transformation process to leverage cloud. Any application that could be hosted on the cloud, let's get it out there. Let's start to use a lot of that capability to scale up, but then also start to think about, well, if it's in the cloud, let's actually secure it in the cloud and secure it the way that it should be. The other point that came up that I found was quite interesting was around sort of that automation piece. I think what this has also taught us is the fact that, for many organizations, obviously, as we started to deal with COVID-19 and how we actually sort of serve our organizations, a CISO really has two priorities that they really need to balance. And that is around how do we protect against the new cyber threats and maintaining business continuity. For that, it's really around how do we ensure that, the cybersecurity teams that the companies may actually have to protect their own infrastructure. We're thinking about how do we scale up this massive shift from home, shift to working from home. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about how do we ensure that the security team members themselves are actually looking after themselves and their families accordingly. For me, it really comes down to, 4 key practices. And that's really around, having focus, where we've got security and technology risk teams should be focusing on the technologies and the security features and capabilities that they've got that are part of the critical operations. Again, that goes back to your BCP planning. Think about revising some of those planning pieces right now. Now more than ever, I would say that every organization should go through the process of testing all of their plans. Whether it's an incident response, whether it's business continuity, disaster recovery, again, we should be going through this. A big thing for me is around monitoring that we touched on. But again, leveraging automation to do that, because what we've seen over the last 6 weeks, more than probably 150,000 net new domains have been created by cyber criminals, where they're simply trying to latch onto COVID-19, Corona, all these different types of domains that are luring people to go to these websites to basically be compromised. So we can't keep up with the plethora of threats that are out there. They're exponentially growing. We know that. And the few people that we have that are actually managing our security operations should be focusing on the most critical elements. So let's say using that 80-20 rule, 80% should be automated and dealt with. 20% should be focused on the higher level activities, the triage, the hunt, find out what are those abnormalities that are actually out there, but leveraging technology to help us out where possible. But then at the same time, I think it's also a bit of a balancing act. We're receiving a plethora of requests that are coming in for policy exceptions. We talked about, I think Mr. Banerjee again was referencing sort of the influx of requests that were coming in for the CISO to actually make all the exceptions that were actually out there. What is it they actually need to allow? We always need to be thinking about how do we manage the risk accordingly. But the net result is, we have to look at a different way. I think what this has taught us is the fact that we can leverage cloud a lot more, that it's no longer simply just a connectivity issue. Absolutely, connectivity is key. But I think we also need to fundamentally think about how do we ensure that we're doing things in an intelligent way moving forward. And if we are leveraging cloud, that's going to force us to do that. So where obviously Palo Alto Networks has actually come to really sort of help out, a lot of the areas that sort of that Anil and Amit have both sort of touched on. So really leveraging that whole secure access out to public cloud, leveraging public cloud providers like Google and Amazon for their high-speed bandwidth networks that are out there, 100 different points of presence all around the globe. That can also be supplemented by things that you're actually doing with your own implementations, whether physical or virtual as well. So for us, it's all about how do we secure that enterprise. And the enterprise is going to keep on growing, keep on moving, and we're going to keep on seeing these challenges, forever and a day sort of growing out there. For me, it's really around how do we secure the cloud, and that's all about that journey to the cloud and leveraging that whole sort of process to say anything that's going to the cloud, we should be able to see it. And for me, that's really around focusing on the threats, the payload, the threats that are really going to cause a material impact. But then as we start to sort of roll out further and further in the cloud, we need to think about leveraging more ways of doing things natively in the cloud and better in the cloud, leveraging infrastructures beyond infrastructure as service, but infrastructure as code. So I need to have visibility. I need to have that audit compliance check across all these cloud platforms. I may even start to think about, developing apps in this new sort of endpoint, as I like to call it, which is around the containers and the serverless compute space. So I need to be thinking about, as a developer, how do I now scan everything, not simply at the run phase, but even earlier on as I start to deploy and even build. And then finally, the key piece is around how do we optimize the SOC? Our own security operations center is running fully from home. Our SOC lead is effectively got, we've got a photo of him basically sitting there with his daughter. So this is the new norm. And we need to think about leveraging automation. We need to be thinking about, how do we ensure that we're keeping the lights on to maintain, the critical operations of all of our businesses, but ensuring, security operations don't actually falter. And I think automation needs to be used more now than ever for that.
Right. Thanks. Sean Duka from Palo Alto. Very deep insights. I don't know how many of you watch those futuristic kind of movies. There've been several movies in which there's some virus that hits the world and everybody dies in like 6 hours, and there are 2 people surviving in the entire world and struggling to make their ends meet. This is who would have thought that this, we would actually see something like that. Of course, there are no zombies walking around there, hopefully, and not everybody is dead. But it's a very bad situation. We never have imagined.
Yesterday, I was driving back from office, and it felt like I was in one of those movies.
Yeah, you went to office yesterday. Okay, you can feel that.
Banking, essential service.
So when my colleague Nidhi went to office to get her desktop back home, she told us later that it looked like a war zone. There were only cops everywhere, and the roads are totally empty. Right? It was quite scary. But at the same time, because business needs to keep moving, life needs to keep moving. Like Sean said, cloud becomes a very, very critical tool, in terms of enabling remote working. but it also means that you need to take some, we did not envision the role of the cloud the way it is being used today, because nobody had imagined that, 90, 95, 100% of their workforce would be working remotely. So the pressure is also very intense, and not just the pressure on the infrastructure, but the pressure on the CISO to make sure that, that your data is protected and safe and well. So I'll come to, Fahim Kulhar of KPIT and Shambhu of Infosys, just to talk about a little bit about this, what sort of steps, what precautions, in this environment where the cloud is absolutely essential, you can't do without it. What precautions should you take, to protect data and your business on cloud platforms? Any cloud platform, it could be public, private, hybrid. So Shambhu and Fahim, it's over to you. And Shambhu, welcome, and sorry about the trouble you had to get into the discussion, but I hope you can now, join us comfortably. So why don't you give us your own perspective first? Shambhu, can you speak?
Shambhu's on mute.
Yeah, okay, I've unmuted him.
Hey, Lokesh, thank you.
Hi.
I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes,
Yes, we can.
loud and clear.
Super.
Thank you.
Super. Okay, super. Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. My perspective is that, now working from home or working out of office has become a new norm in the business, and it was BCP and business resilience was just a kind of the agenda for CISOs and CIOs. Now it has become a business priority, right? It has become a boardroom conversation, and hopefully in the coming decade, so every organization will make sure that they are completely business resilient to face such kind of pandemic situation, which is going to open up a lot of opportunities for technology organizations like Infosys and as well as Palo Alto and others. Having said that, how we have done at Infosys, I'll look at it from two perspectives. One, Infosys with 220,000 employees, how we ourselves are gearing up to continue our services to our customers. Number two, how we are helping our customers as their services partner to enable them to continue their services, right? So, well, working from home was not a new norm for Infosys, right? And we had moved more than around 35% of our employees working from home and working from remote offices anyways, before this situation. And this situation has only helped us to kind of revalidate our preparation and kind of rescale it to the higher levels. So as we speak, all our customers are being still served from remote, and the BCP DR that we have worked out for delivering our customer services fully validated and tested. And none of our customers are impacted in terms of our service delivery to keep their services running. Okay, that's the first part of it. The second part of this is that we serve close to around 250 customers from cybersecurity operations perspective. We make sure that we scale up their capacity, we scale up their cyber resiliency, and we start monitoring the new threat landscape that they have to get into, right? So because now the threat boundaries have gone beyond the perimeters, as someone was saying in this conversation. It's no more perimeter security, no more office premises, etc. The focus of threat monitoring has gone beyond the office boundaries. So we ourselves do a lot of research, and we produce a lot of advisory direction to the customers. So as part of that, what we realized that the threat, because of the threat landscape, all these hackers and the cyber criminals are focusing on new avenues of breaching into the enterprise estate. Okay, we are seeing that trend when we actually monitor the threat intelligence and also get some insight from the dark web, etc. We are seeing that trend happening, and we are getting up, and we're also producing advisory to not only the customers whom we manage, but customers whom we don't manage their cybersecurity threat. Right now, as a goodwill, as trusted partner, we continue to provide these directions. For Infosys, I don't think being cyber resilient and being implementing this zero trust is new. It was there, and it is going to be it's going to be there even in future as well. Just that the scale has gone up from 1/3 of the organization to maybe entire 95% of our employees now completely enabled for remote operations. Be it be VPN, be it be through O365, all of those things. I really do not want to get into the details about how they are secured, how are we managing it and all, because for us those are all pretty much hygiene. If I have to look at it, just to give an example, so my laptop is completely protected from using Zoom. So because unless it is fully scanned and tested for every transaction, so I will not get allowed to connect to the Zoom. So okay, that's what has happened in my case before I get connected over here. Okay, so this is already in place, and as you speak.
Okay, so it was not a problem with us. The
we are
problem
fully
was
ready.
at your end.
Yes, the problem is on my end to make sure that to my customers and my organization is fully protected. So I'm okay to get delayed for this, but I don't want to make sure that even a single percentage of the breach is opened up into my organization. That is not something that any of our employees will be looking to compromise.
Right. Thank you, Shambhu, for that insight. And I will ask Fahim from KPIT. There seems to be some feedback. So, Suchetna, can you just ask that question of Fahim?
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead, Fahim.
Go ahead, Fahim.
I'll just start with that. I think all the organizations who are operating from India, a bit fortunate, I would say, in the sense actually there was a little bit amount of time was available to prepare ourselves. Like if I learn from other countries like China, who started this pandemic bit early as compared to any of the other part of the world actually. So there was ample of time. Maybe like 15 days just to prepare ourselves, what is that basic necessities required. Maybe like, the thought process started coming, by learning from other part of the world. But saying so, it was a mammoth, effort in terms of making from some percentage or, 0% of work from home to making sure that the entire business is, based on the remote working concept. Saying so, for us actually, it was not difficult, apart from that, the operational burdens or constraint, like, scaling up, the capacity and, classifying the user category and the persona and profiling for them actually. Besides that one, actually, like security is one of the pillar which has been considered in the annual operating plan altogether. Since last many years actually there is a consistent investment was happening in the security framework, but that is not the end of story. I think cyber security or the business continuity plan is a never ending story. We need to go deeper and deeper every day, every minute. That's what from a security point of view, we cannot say that we are rest assured and the security is in place actually. So we keep on investing time and money and a lot of efforts towards making sure that we are up to the mark as per the current scenario or the future scenario is concerned. Because if you look at the risk which are the threats which are coming, the changing trend is there actually. So we need to be always geared up, as somebody rightly pointed that we look at only the basic level of the security assessment, be it the VPN connectivity and
any
etc.
specific precautions you would recommend that we want companies should take? Any specific precautions?
So I think from VPN perspective, because I understood that the VPN connectivity and the control, but many of our colleagues have shared their experience as well. The device posture assessment is the key point, along with the other key factor to secure us, like multi-factor authentication, etc. So once it is coming up, then we need to have our the perimeter devices and the internal east-west traffic or north-south traffic analytic piece, which can help you in terms of securing even application side as well. So that what are the threats which are coming from the corporate application side, irrespective of the endpoint are which are been very secured, the agents are working for them and the assessment. Because if I look at the internal threats and external threats, if you look at in today's scenario, the working from home has considered those internal threats have become the external threats, because the user is coming, our employee is coming from the other than our network actually. So we need to treat, it has gone in a big percentage in terms of the threats. So it could be unknowingly, unintentionally, but it's a threat for the enterprises wherein you are handling your own critical data and the customer data. It's a more liability is there on that front actually. Saying so, I think not only from that, the network level or the access level, the controls what we need to ensure. Going beyond, this has given, I would say, the opportunity to think much more in terms of security, how we can go at the granular level and how we can secure. The takeaway from COVID-19 for me is though we are consistently investing in terms of people, process, and the technology, but it does require different dimension in terms of the thought process. So that has really like in knocking the door day and night actually. So we need to really start once again revisiting the entire security framework, and how we can collaborate, having that the hybrid model or the complete cloud model or the on-prem, and keeping that mind that some of the policies which are getting imposed from a GDPR perspective and data privacy perspective, all together it is a kind of a single framework, but addressing all these pointers. Yes, the technology is there to complement it, and also we need to revisit in each and everything. I would say that most of the things, I will take this opportunity because Palo Alto has helped KPIT since last many years now, because they are the one of the prime partner in terms of security partnership with us.
Right.
But there are some of the products which have really helped us in terms of securing our the data center, our IPs, our the customer databases, application side. So it's a one is the technology which is there, but you need to figure out what exactly the technology which is suitable for the threats what we have or the risk what we have in a different the business models. Secondly, that when it comes to the people and process, equal amount of efforts are required in terms of educating our employees or the partners in terms of what are the responsibility of them. I'll just share one example actually. Working from home, like you are just extending that office environment to that user home. Saying so, getting tested there, the Wi-Fi routers, and also giving them checklist, and then getting that acknowledgement and the assurance that our employee has taken care of those kind of configuration to secure enough the basic connectivity itself. So those kind of things, it's not related to the technology, but yes, the user awareness, I would say it comes in the operational requirement. So these are the few of the basic things which helped us in terms of not only educating, but also securing our entire environment, which gets extended to the homes as well.
Thanks, Fahim, for your inputs. You were talking about operations, something that Mr. Banerjee also spoke about, how COVID-19 is really pushing the boundaries as to what organizations allow and don't allow when it comes to working from home. My question is for Mr. Banerjee, Mr. Rastogi, and to Mr. Swaminathan. You have employees who directly deal with customer data. Say, for example, your executives at your call center. So how are you handling the challenge of cybersecurity and protecting data when it comes to employees who are directly dealing with client information? Mr. Banerjee, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, we use VDI where no data download upload is possible into the end device. And there are also protections around printing and, of course, we can't prevent somebody from taking a camera and clicking the photo of a screen. But VDI technology otherwise has been quite robust in preventing people from being able to download data from the system. Now, most data thefts actually are more concerned about bulk data. They're not really concerned about one individual record as much. And even today, it's pretty hard to prevent one individual record being leaked out. Our first focus is bulk data should not get leaked out. We are trying other things to see if photos and all that can be prevented, but that is very challenging because we have no control over the endpoint. We have no control over the environment that the person is sitting in. Even if
Mhm.
he's using an RBL laptop, we have no
Yeah.
control over who is sitting next to him, beside him, behind him, what kind of devices. We did some facial experiments with facial recognition, saying if somebody, looks over your shoulder, we can try and prevent it. But, this kind of timeline, it is not possible to roll this out reliably.
The internal threat that
Uh,
Mr. Bhatt spoke about. This is really the internal threat.
It's not necessarily internal. See, once you're at home, we may trust you, but we may not trust your brother. Things like that. How do we ensure that the household who has access is reliable? And we can't really. There's no way to do it, especially at this kind of notice.
Yeah.
So there are some things that we have to live with. For instance, we are doing call center from out of home. Normal call center, physical call center, we don't allow mobiles. If you're doing it from home, then there's no concept of doing that. So we are trying to therefore use masking so that the screen doesn't even show that data, which limits some functions, but allows most functions to go through. That's how we're tackling all this. Again, because the rate of implementation is so rapid, there are certain things we just can't do in time, because it would mean changes to our core system, which would mean a lot of, and especially because it came at the end of the year. We couldn't make changes to our core systems because year end would start getting affected.
Yes. Right. Mr. Rastogi, over to you.
So that's how we dealt with. I mean,
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Suchetna. Thanks, Mr. Banerjee. As Mr. Banerjee has pointed out, right? So the risk posture which we are looking at is a bulk data vector by an insider threat. So our customer service reps are really dealing with their internal applications. We don't provide them any access to raw data at all. And if any access which is again goes through an application which is an internal application, and through which their all access is audited and logged, and only the access which is required for that particular data point is provided. And for example, payment information like card and all, we just never provide to anybody. So that is one of the security principles. So that way we are dealing with bulk information, and of course, single records can be taken. People can click a photo and things like that. But our focus really from a risk posture point of view is from a bulk data standpoint. And we have a robust auditing system where we audit the access, who is accessing what, and those access are more monitored and things like that.
Okay, same question I have for Mr. Swaminathan. What happens at Chola? What happens at your call centers there?
So, we have a combination. We have a small in-house call center team. So for them, again, like what others mentioned earlier, there is more of an application-driven access to data. So access to bulk data is fairly limited. And for them, at the endpoint, we have the typical controls of USB, print controls, and we also have integration with SIEM. So we know if there is any particular flow that needs to be tracked and then resolved. What we have also done, for our third-party call centers, many of them we do a third-party audit and make sure whether they have the right controls, like somebody mentioned, not having cameras being taken inside and so on. So we do the same. And then now when they started moving offline, we had ongoing sessions to make sure whether their applications are masking the critical PII data. So post that review and confirmation from us is where we then allow the third-party call centers to work on our behalf remotely. And the third part of bulk access to data, again, that's controlled through access reviews. We also have privileged access management solutions in place so that somebody who's going to act in an administrative or super user kind of capacity is going through the right level of hoops before he accesses that information. And there's a clear logging of what he's doing in such a controlled environment.
Right. I have a question for Amit. What we're hearing in this conversation so far is that COVID-19 is really throwing up newer challenges, newer opportunities that would mean newer solutions. So when it comes to this pandemic, what are the new innovations that you see will come as far as cybersecurity is concerned?
Mm-hmm. Look, I think the challenge we face as a community is how to get business done, do it securely, but do it remotely. I think this will, and do it in a time when we're going to go through the worst recession we've seen. So you don't have that much money to spend. Challenging. I think simplifying the architecture, solving the remote access plus security at scale, trying to move more aggressively to cloud, and then, secure the cloud workloads as best as you can. What's in the cloud, the applications in the cloud, how developers push code, and frankly, how to run, remote SOC type capabilities around threat hunting and some of the things that the clients already talked about. But a lot of that has to be done with, I think, fewer moving parts. Like, I don't think we'll be in a situation where we'll be hiring lots of people. Mm-hmm. We won't have excess capital available. Yeah. So how do you do that? And I think that's going to be a challenge for our community together, is to find what those levels are. And, I would suggest this is not I don't mean to have this be a commercial. I'm not generally focused on it. How can you do more with what you have and turn off things and consolidate them into areas that already are going to give them to you? You'll naturally do that. And this is a good time to step back and try and figure that out.
Okay. Thanks for that. And, we have, of course, run out of time. We were supposed to close at 11:30 and we have gone on. I think it's been a fascinating discussion, but I'll come for a last question to the group. And I'll start with Rajshekar Joshi. Aditya Birla Group, basically, if we quickly to some of the panelists here, and I'll come to you individually, are there some best practices, in the post-COVID world? Hopefully, obviously, we will have a post-COVID world, we tend to get too absorbed in our current and in the doomsday scenario.
Okay. I do have to leave though. 11:45 is, I have to leave.
Sure, Mr. Banerjee. Thank you so much for joining us. No problem.
Please. Thanks for having me, and great to see all the panelists. Great to meet Amit again.
Yeah, very nice to see you. Yeah, I have to log off as well, but it's a great privilege.
Thanks, Amit.
Bye, guys.
So, my question is, are there some lessons that we are learning today that, we should take forward and frame as best practices? So I'll come to Rajshekar Joshi of Aditya Birla Group first. Mr. Joshi, if you can give us a view. Are you there? You're on
mute, Mr. Joshi. You're on mute.
Yeah.
See, there are certain practices and tasks which are timeless. It's only that crisis reminds us. The crisis reminds us that we need to do that, in a far more robust way. So today, right now, the situation which we are is unprecedented, of course, and it's going to certainly relax at some moment of time, of course, and the new normal is going to come up. But I think important thing is that as I emphasized when I said that the basics are extremely important. I think we need to. That's one part is that the basics in terms of endpoints being secured, AV, user awareness, and users being told, so phishing campaigns and so on and so forth, and patches. I think that's extremely important. That's one part. The second is, of course, leveraging your existing investments, because we found that there are many capabilities of our existing investments which we are not using at all, or we are just, they were just aside. So I think that's one part. So leveraging brilliant basics, leveraging your existing investments, that's as much as possible. That's number two. And third is, of course, that we need to move to a normal. Cloud was already being prevalent extensively, and but of course there will be a greater movement, considering our diversity and heterogeneity. We always have a very things are in state of flux, that some companies doing something, some is still starting, some is ending. So, but I think movement to cloud is inevitable. We have our proxy internet access through secure cloud as well as through proxy. We have a mix and match, but we are moving to nimble solutions. We are moving to solutions which have less hops. For example, the secure cloud, secure access gateway for internet through cloud has less hops, which is there. So just summarizing, brilliant basics, leveraging your existing investments which are there, And the third is, of course, moving towards more nimbler solutions and with lesser, what you call as touch points of risk. I think these are the three things.
Right. Thank you. KN Bhatt, next time, same question to you. Any best practices that you see that you can be taken forward?
So, big learning for all organizations. If you look at the investment landscape in cybersecurity, most of us invest in protection and defensive systems. It's time that we start realizing that investments have to be balanced across identification, response, and recovery also. So these are the 5 pillars that make up a cybersecurity posture for an organization. Unfortunately, 90% of the organizations invest in protection and defense system. We carry that analogy in cybersecurity that prevention and preemption is the best way forward. But the world that we live in, identify, response, and recover is actually very much the need of the hour. So the new normal being endpoints which will be disparate, inconsistent networks, yet people coming into the core infrastructure. I again will reiterate, one is balance your investment in cybersecurity across the 5 pillars. Secondly, an aware employee is your best defense, because end of the day, these endpoints use your infrastructure and they need to be motivated to make the right choices.
Right. Thank you. Parvez Anwar of BCCL. Parvez, your views on best practices that you've learned that you want to carry forward?
Yeah. 2 very important things which are going to stay is, one is BYOD and there is collaboration based on cloud. Without this, we'll not be able to work. And from security perspective, monitoring of security continuously for remote access and for internal systems is a must. Now we have collaborated with the SOC and we are getting continuous reports and daily alerts. So monitoring is important, and be ready to, we have to be ready to, to handle incidents. So we need to have a tie-up with very high-end incident management and response third-party partners. We might also look into cyber insurance as a risk mitigation plan. We had evaluated cyber insurance, but that was before COVID scenario. So incident management, cyber insurance, risk mitigation, and security monitoring is very important.
Right. And come to Fahim Kolar of KPIT. Fahim, your views on best practices?
I think Fahim has had to leave the conversation. He's had to go for another meeting.
Okay, we'll come to Shambhu then. Shambhu of Infosys.
Yeah, I think the biggest need is to kind of reassess the threat landscape. So don't limit yourself to only the perimeter. I think threat landscape has gone beyond the perimeters. So endpoints are serious considerations when we actually do a risk assessment. Make sure that the endpoints are fully protected and they are allowed to work from anywhere needed. So from work, from home, from remote locations. And apply the suitable controls for making the user to operate in an agile manner. So this is the key learning. And the second one is, don't wait for pandemic to happen. Make sure that enterprise is resilient and keep testing it and be ready for recovery.
Yeah, I think the business continuity planning exercise is going to take on a completely different dimension after COVID-19.
Absolutely.
Thinking of completely different scenarios. And so, thank you very, very much to all the panelists and to my co-moderator, Suchetna Ray. To wrap up, I would like to invite Sean Duca again from Palo Alto Networks. Sean, if you could give your closing remarks, please.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and appreciate you all spending a good part of 2 hours with us and listening to, I guess, to some great points of how all of you have actually managed to work over the last 5 to 6 weeks working from home. I think there's probably a couple of key things that I'd say, probably some key words that I picked up throughout the course that were definitely sort of in line with many of you, which I think if I was to sort of put what my takeaway items are and also kind of what the world looks like in a post-COVID world, or let's just call it today, what sort of the new normal actually is. I definitely agree with a lot of the points around sort of awareness. I think that is just one fundamental piece that we need to continue to ensure happens. We have a remote workforce right now. And I think if anything, now's the time that we want to try and encourage our teams to stay as secure as possible when they're working from home. That may actually mean probably stepping outside of the realm of what our maybe IT security teams have actually been doing. I think we've always had sort of the posters. We've always, shared some sort of security best practices of how people should actually be doing things at home. I think now's the time we probably want to try and check on some of our most high-risk individuals to an organization. Let's actually see if they've actually got their networks configured the right way. Like, let's actually start to raise that awareness levels a little bit more. Now is the time that, in times of chaos, cybercrime actually is rife. People know that we're all at home. It's no surprise that the number of threats that we're seeing targeting home routers is actually exponentially increased. So think about that. And that's kind of part of that sort of a raising awareness aspect that we should always be thinking about. At all times, we need to be thinking about how do we protect our business when staff are working from home anyway. We talked about some of the key aspects there, which is around, explain to our teams they're working remotely, treat the home office as an extension to the work office, reminding our staff that kind of all of our information security policies always still apply when they're working at home. This is probably a time that we need to think about what are some of those changes that we need to be making to some of those policies. I think, Colin from KPIT, you talked about a couple of key aspects there around, sort of redefining. I think the word that you use, let's actually revisit, is probably another word that I talked about. For me, a personal mantra that I always have is do different. Kind of whatever we've actually done to get us to this place today is probably not going to be the same playbook that we could use for the next X amount of time. So let's actually revisit it. Let's actually start to, potentially use this as an opportunity to disrupt ourselves. We have been disrupted. I think many businesses around the world are probably going through their own form of disruption. We know that there's going to be an economic downturn pretty much globally, probably something worse than we've ever seen before. So it's going to force our businesses to do something different. From a security, from a IT operations, a range of different aspects, we should be thinking about how does that actually change the way that we do something. I think, a lot of the elements that Amit just sort of talked about sort of in the end there, he mentioned things such as, let's actually think about how we get our businesses up and running, for starters, in this sort of world. How do we do that securely? How do we do it remotely? But then at the same time, I think we also need to be stressing the fact that there is another day, which is tomorrow. And I think we need to start thinking about the design phase of what that architecture should actually look like. That move to cloud, and the term that I always use is either radical or rapid digital transformation. I think this is now the time that we have to go through this motion more and more. We have to change the way that we've been doing things. I don't believe that, there has never been a time that I've spoken to an organization in India where they haven't talked about consolidation. Now's the time you want to do a lot more with probably fewer vendors. Leverage a platform, for lack of a better term, to really solve some of these challenges. Going out and buying those piecemeal solutions never really solved a problem for us in the past. Now more than ever, having someone manage 100 different management consoles probably is not going to really work or be a tenable solution at home. So now we want to start to think about how do we can try and consolidate a lot of this, because in a cost-constrained environment that we're going to be moving to, we actually need to be thinking about doing this a lot more. So I think now more than ever, we want to start to think about it overall. But kind of in closing, I guess there's a couple of key things that sort of really sort of stick out for me, which is kind of, again, focusing on the people, process, technology. And I'll start with the technology side of being a technologist. Don't actually sort of relax a lot of the work that we've been doing around patching. Now we really want to ensure that we're actually sort of stepping up the game from the patches. Multi-factor authentication should be a de facto standard, nothing less, and we don't compromise that at all. We see, the most common thing that I've seen over the years is people leveraging something like Office 365. They decided to not pay the couple of dollars per user per month to get multi-factor authentication. And lo and behold, they end up getting compromised through business email compromise emails. This is happening now. So multi-factor authentication on your most critical apps first, and then start to work down that list. I think that's an absolute fundamental. Think about the fact of how we're going to start to work in this world probably consistently for a while. Social distancing will happen. We're probably going to be working in rolling shifts going in and out of the office, so we need to think of other ways. Shadow IT will be a standard. We need to see it, we need to do something about it, or at least tolerate it to a certain extent. From a people side, I think there's probably an element where I think, the communication, it was touched on a couple of times as well, communicate creatively and do it often. That's the thing we need to think about. Focus on what to do rather than what not to do. I think we need to think about more and more, how do we communicate kind of the positive messages or the positive tone in what we do, as opposed to sort of, thou shall not do something. Identify and monitor high user groups. People that are working with sensitive information, all of you talked about handling of data. There is sensitive information, there's confidential information, there's, publicly available information. What are the most critical people that need to get access to that? They're the ones that we need to monitor. And it's not a case of we don't trust them, but they're also the ones that could also be targeted as well. From a process side, the thing that I think we should be promoting more and more, especially in this time, is resilience. We need to ensure that we're supporting secure remote access solutions. It's not a remote access solution or problem that we have. We need to think about how to do it securely. And kind of a lot of the points that I talked about earlier around leveraging the cloud to deliver that is probably going to be a better, more efficient, and probably even a cost-effective way of doing it as well, rather than you creating all these different points of presence. It's going to help out. Playing that sort of traffic cop is good. Inspecting what we're actually sort of, what traffic is passing through is absolutely fundamental. Test our processes. I talked about it earlier, instant response, BCP, disaster recovery. We need to be thinking about it more and more. Expand our monitoring viewpoints. Security operations. We talked about the fact that we need to continue to do this all the time, and we're going to do it for a sustained time remotely. I think the other key part for me is really around, or the final part on the processes. Some of you talked about some of the takeaways that you want to do. A lot of that was around monitoring. It was around third parties. It was around cyber insurance. For me, I think probably the big fundamental is, let's actually ensure that we are confirming the security of our third parties right now. The example that I think was actually used at the start was, I'm trying to think of who actually mentioned it, but one of their partners talked about the facts of, they were actually compromised by the Maze ransomware. Again, we need to be thinking about, this is inevitable. So let's confirm the security for each of our third parties. But overall, look, I think there's a lot of positive that's come out of it. It's taught us a lot. It's probably going to teach us how to be resilient. And I think it's something that we need to ensure that we keep on driving moving forward. But from me, thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity and the time. And Economic Times, thank you very much for everything as well.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you to all the panelists. Indeed, things are going to change, but like humans, we have always evolved and become stronger despite challenges. So hopefully this challenge will also make us, stronger rather than weaker as we go ahead. So thank you all very, very much for joining us, and we will close the discussion here.
Thank you.
And one last point.
Thank you.
Who have not sent your high resolution photographs, please do send it, because the photographs will be used in the print coverage. Without the photographs, we cannot put your code there. So please send us the photograph today. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suchetna and Alokesh. Thank you all.
Thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay.